But one farmer says, seems to me there was a tea party in Boston that was illegal too.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
We shall seek to establish and maintain a dollar which will not change its purchasing and debt-paying power during the succeeding generation.
As anguished shrieks rose up from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
Government credit and government currency are really one and the same thing. A reserve of gold and a small reserve of silver.
Why do central banks hold it?
Well, it's a form of reserves.
So why don't they hold diamonds?
Well, it's tradition, long-term tradition.
Some people still think it's money.
Good evening and welcome back to the Junius Maltby channel, the most boring channel on the YouTube. Checking in on gold prices currently overseas in Asia as the markets are open. We're seeing gold trading at $1,556. Just a slight retreat from that peak of 1600 when all of the war hysteria with Iran was rippling around the world. Today we're going to take a turn. We're going to incorporate several articles, some of which were sent to me by friends and fellow subscribers, but they tie into one consistent theme, and it's the overall theme that we discuss here often. So as we venture into what are current articles, some of which covering topics we've discussed here and there throughout the last several years, the overall backdrop of this exists on a tapestry that is embroidered with debt. Debt and currency issuance at a level like we have never seen in history. Dollars exploding and flooding the world, as you see in this graphic here. Debased, valueless, leper fiat zombie currency, backed by absolutely nothing whatsoever. Now, as more of these dollars, these $100 notes, are printed or even issued as digits in the screens, they will continue to chase after and seek fixed commodities, things like gold and silver, the amount of which stays fairly consistent and increases at such a slow and small rate it's almost not worth mentioning. But the explosion, the volcano of fiat that you see covering the globe like a plume of ash, is something that you can't escape from. There is a way. We've seen it throughout history for thousands of years. And what we're going to look at now are certain articles that point to what others are doing, what we've talked about here, but also why it might be important to take notice of what's going on in the economic world, and why I believe that the information that's found not only here on this channel, I'm a nobody, you all know that. If you've been here for any length of time, that's become obvious. But mostly the fact that this information is not only found here, but in other areas that you can look for. The von Mises Institute, the Austrian School of Economics, people like Professor Anatole Fouquet, people far more brilliant than me. You know, the ones who create the information. I'm just the medium that kind of passes it on to you on the other side of the mic here. But the information that you find in places like this channel and others, if you're able to grasp it and utilize it some way to preserve some facet of your family's wealth or your wealth, then you're going to be in a better position. The first article that I want to look at is what others are doing, because I think when we see what certain members of society have chosen to do to protect themselves in this coming typhoon of fiat, we can make certain decisions based upon theirs. There's an old adage, a smart man learns from his mistakes, a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. And now in this case, it's somewhat opposite. The wise will learn from the proper decision making of others and following suit. Now, for years, this channel has been founded upon the premise that it is good and beneficial and imperative for us to store our wealth that we have here, our labor, the fruits of our labors, in some form other than that fiat storm that we see, the backless paper. Gold and silver being the primary two metals that I discuss and report on here on the Junius Maltby channel. It's always been encouraged. It's really the foundation of how this channel came to be. The first article is exactly that. There are people out there, and we've talked about this in previous videos, but it serves to reiterate it, I think. It's a very important observation that's taking place. The world's super rich are hoarding physical gold in secret bunkers. This article comes out from January 11th. We've covered this just recently. I put out a video, and I will include the link down below, covering a similar topic on these new move of the ultra rich, not only buying the SPDRs anymore, those gold ETFs and paper gold, they are now acquiring and hoarding on their own physical bullion. Now, not only is that going to put a squeeze on the supply on that end of the market, I look at this change in their behavior as somewhat of the canary in the mine, a sign that the overall economy is not only sick, but we are facing something that might be coming. Of course, nobody ever knows when exactly. It's a shift. It's a mindset shift. Now, I'm not saying that all of the super rich or anyone who's absolutely wealthy or who was an outlier in the last century, because we all know that anyone who really invested in the 1950s and 60s and sat on it for some time, the boomers, if you will, if you'll pardon me using the term, it was fairly easy. You could almost throw darts on a board, and as long as that dart hit any stock in particular, you would succeed and gain wealth from it. Now, that was a situation that existed in the U.S. economy specifically that I don't think is going to be replicated. Many of those people, again, they were outliers. They existed in a time where it was somewhat easy to make those investment decisions and get exorbitant amounts of wealth just by putting money into the system. Well, now the system is dying, and I believe the wealth is going to leave it and find itself in more stable areas to be unleashed and reinvested later when everything sorts itself out. When the currencies stabilize or become normalized, the ones that go extinct, the ones that rise out of those ashes and become more stable somehow if they are backed by something. There's no way for us to be able to tell what is going to take place out of the ashes of ruin that come from this economic turmoil that is imminent. However, I don't think all the ultra-rich are smart enough to even see it. I've heard and watched interviews, I've discussed it, I've even talked to some. They absolutely don't have any clue about economic theory or history, the role of precious metals. They don't even know where to begin. There's no key dates in their minds. They know nothing of FDR's ban on gold, Nixon closing the gold window in 1971, the flow of gold internationally, where it is, how much there is, how much actually exists, that there's only roughly $5 to $6 trillion worth of physical gold above ground ever mined since the beginning of time, that central banks are gobbling up and buying it at levels never before seen. It's being hoarded away, and it's also being hoarded away now by some of their brethren, some of these super rich. They are hoarding physical gold in secret bunkers. So let's take a look at this first article as an introduction to today's video and discuss it. The strategic case for owning gold remains strong, according to analysts at Goldman Sachs. They point to such factors as political uncertainty, recession fears, and other worries among the global elite. So, the global elite, if they're worried about some of these things, I believe that we, the peasants, the plebes, the serfs, and the knaves, the peons, it's most likely something we should pay attention to as well. Data from Goldman Research showed that owning the physical metal seems to be the global elite's preferred way to hedge against tail events. Physical buying of gold has increased at a rapid pace in the past 3 years, statistics showed. So just the last 3 years. Quote, since the end of 2016, the implied build in non-transparent gold investments has been much larger than the build in visible gold ETFs or exchange-traded funds, paper gold. Goldman said in a note sent to clients and seen by Yahoo. I call it Yahoo Finance. So what does that mean? It means the ultra wealthy are now moving away from paper gold into physical gold, and essentially it's being hidden. It's invisible, which means I don't think we're ever going to know where they're putting it, where it's moving, but it's obviously a sign, and it's something that when you look at the timeline here, the last 3 years is not that long ago. I mean, 3 years, pretty small window in time when you lay it over the course of a couple of decades, especially over the last century or two of wealth, the ultra wealthy, the big rich families, and so the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Vanderbilts, those types of people. That's the level I believe we're talking about here. And then there's of course the unnamed, the shadow families that we don't know who they are. But this is a big move, and it's only taken place the last 3 years. This wasn't happening, to my knowledge. There was no news of it, no information of it back when I started this channel, or back when I was a younger man and buying metals on my own. This wasn't really discussed at all, and that's why I take this as a significant point of demarcation on the timeline here of what's going on with the economy, with the world economy, not only the U.S., because a lot of times I refer to the U.S. economy because that's where I abide. The dude abides in the U.S., but this is a global thing, and I think it is international. I think internationally, wealthy families are all following suit and moving in this direction. So take a look at this chart here. This is the implied build in non-transparent gold investment. It's been larger than the build in gold ETFs. The yellow or goldish colored bar there you see is trade implied and vaulted gold. Okay, that's the vaulted gold, physical, actual, precious metal. The purple line there is in the trash that we talk about often, gold ETF. You remember the video I did several years ago where ETF gold is essentially a gold in the bar in the middle of a room surrounded by 4 windows, and the buyers are looking at it from each window, and they cannot see the buyer on the other side of the one-way glass, and they are all told that that gold bar in the middle of the room belongs to them. However, you have 4 windows surrounding that bar, and everyone thinks that because they're looking at the bar, it belongs to them. And little do they know there are other buyers on the other side of the glass, on the other side of the room, looking at the exact same bar, and they believe that it belongs to them as well. Gold ETF issues paper for gold that I believe does not exist at all. And we've covered that. The information's out there. That's not the premise of this video. The topic here is the rise in those buying physical gold. One of the reasons, I think they see it. I think they know ETF gold is likely not as trustworthy as the physical bullion itself. I am not arrogant at all enough to believe that any of these people have ever seen 2 minutes of a Junius Maltby video at all. Even though it's something that I've kind of honked the horn on here for some time, that you want to get the physical. If you don't have it, you don't own it. You guys are all familiar with that saying. If you don't have it in possession, you do not own it. And that's really the mindset here that these ultra wealthy are exercising. They are taking physical delivery and vaulting gold bullion. You can see it there clearly. The gold bar really taking an uptick there and rising much higher, especially from 2016 to now, the last 3 years, as the article talks about. Whereas ETF gold's kind of just piddling along there. It's not really doing a whole lot. If anything, it dipped for a long time. It's dipped below since then, and it's just essentially flat. Whereas we're seeing 500 and 1,000 and even 1,500 tons of physical bullion being vaulted away by the ultra-rich. This data is consistent with reports that vault demand globally is surging, Goldman said. Gary Lynch, general manager of Texas-based Rising S Company, told CNN that 2016 sales for their custom high-end underground bunkers grew 700% compared to 2015, while overall sales have grown 300% since the November U.S. presidential election alone. Political risks, in our view, help explain this, because if an individual is trying to minimize the risks of sanctions or wealth taxes, then buying physical gold bars and storing them in a vault where it is more difficult for governments to reach them makes sense, unquote. The investment bank added, quote, finally, this build can also reflect hedges by global high net worth individuals against tail economic and political risk scenarios in which they do not want to have any financial entity intermediating their gold positions due to the counterparty credit risk involved. That's a lot of gobbledygook, right? When they say things like tail economic and political risk scenarios, it's a very gentle way of saying the shit hitting the fan, TSHTF, or Teotihuacan, the end of the world as we know it. I think that's what a lot of these wealthy people have in the back of their mind. And I will elaborate. I won't divulge too much information to give up my position or where this took place, but I have had the privilege in my life of being exposed to and being around people in this category. When I was younger, I worked in construction. I worked on some very uber wealthy homes. One of them in particular, and this is back in the 90s, was having a vault installed in the property with a vault door, concrete bunker-like scenario. Very, very, very wealthy home up in a mountainous region. And I was informed, and again, you know my position. You knew that I already had this mindset back then. But the individual built this vault to store his silver and gold, unquote. That is what the general contractor stated. That's what it was being designed and built for. That's why the vault door was being installed. This gentleman who was building this mountain estate, very secluded on a multi-thousand acre estate, and it was up on a hillside, a lot of stone walls, very, very beautiful structure. He had a vault installed, and in that vault he was placing gold and silver, a lot of his wealth. When you read things like this article here, it's very clear to see that other people in his category are now doing the same thing. And I'm sure they're not the only ones, and I'm sure that it's been going on for a lot longer than the last 3 years we read here. I think it's been accurately, I would say this has probably been going on for the last 10 or more years. I have heard of other examples. I've seen other examples on a case-by-case and individual basis where very wealthy, very elite people have been setting up for themselves a retreat, an escape for what could be coming in perhaps not the near future, but in the future. And of course, no one knows what that timeline looks like. It might be for their families. I know of one in particular, a location where one of these individuals put in a vault as well. And in that vault, he was storing not only some precious metals, but it was a little bit more elaborate as far as some living quarters and some food and other tools that you might need during such a time as chaos might reign. Now, the wealthy elite aren't the only ones doing such a thing. There's nations preparing for the exact same scenario. Currency shakeup, economic shakeup, defaults, whatever the scenario is. I think a lot of people are understanding that things are not good and they're likely going to get worse. You don't have to be a rocket surgeon to take a look at the global debt charts, the U.S. debt clock, and realize fairly quickly that it's not going to improve and it cannot get better. Russia and China, two of the names that we read here often whenever we report central bank gold buying and large gold purchases. I mean, these two nations have popped up on this channel for the last 6 or 7 years repeatedly. I can't even recall how many times, how many articles. It's got to be once a week, right? Once or every so often you guys have seen Russia and China mentioned. Well, here we see it again. This is obviously a September 10th article, but it was linked to through one of these other ones. So it's fairly recent. I know I wasn't really doing a lot of videos back in September, so that's why I plugged this one in. Because even though it's September, I still believe the information is very relevant, and we have reported on this before, but it serves as a reminder. And thank you, Miss Maltby, for the random passing kiss as you walked by. That was unexpected, but welcome. Nice little kiss on the cheek there. Yes, Russia and China stockpiling gold because they can read the writing on the wall. Peter Schiff, a titan when it comes to being bullish on gold. Now, yes, these numbers are a little dated because the article is from September. However, it was just, a couple of months ago, so it's very relevant. But global central banks, particularly Russia and China, they've been boosting their gold reserves at a rapid pace. We've seen it. Again, I'll reiterate, we've talked about this quite a bit. The trend is projected to continue due to trade tensions and market uncertainty. Now, I'm not going to read the entire article because we have covered it before. It's the main point of the article that I wanted to mention, bring up, and show here. These nations are buying gold in the hundreds of tons. And the reason for that is they can see the writing on the wall. They can see that they are preparing for the world where the dollar is no longer the reserve currency. And that is the key. A world where the dollar is no longer the reserve currency. I do believe that the dollar's days are numbered, that it is a currency that not only the people here in the country are losing faith in, but a lot of other nations are. And I think, quite frankly, people are sick and nations are sick of the United States flexing this, their monopoly on the issuance of a world reserve currency and forcing everyone to basically take their dollars or use the dollar as something to peg their currency to. It's gotten to the point where it's a luxury that people don't want to see the United States afforded any longer. And they've abused it. The U.S. has abused that position, and they are defending and protecting that position, I believe, through threats, through violence, through economic hijacking, economic hitmen. And it's something that fuels the military-industrial complex here and this empire state of mind, this ability to just go around the world and bully other people, either physically or economically, for resources and for all types of reasons. Always, of course, with the altruistic motives in mind, according to the heads of state, which we know is complete hogwash and BS. The world is on the brink of financial crash as a wave of debt threatens an unhappy ending. This is an article that was sent to me by my dad just recently. I was at work when I got it, so I could not do the story on it. And this is from January 9th, so fairly new. A global economic crisis could soon be at hand, according to the World Bank's latest economic report. So again, this article, when you plug it in with some of the information we just went over, points to perhaps the reason people are doing what they are doing. In its biannual Global Economic Prospects report, the organization warned of a debt accumulation wave, which could have an unhappy ending. In the report, the World Bank highlighted 4 waves of debt accumulation over the last 50 years. The previous 3 all ended in a financial crisis in many developing countries. It is my belief that this 4th wave could be perhaps the worst, the longest lasting, and the one that will wreak the most havoc. The current wave started in 2010, and according to the organization, it is the largest, fastest, and most broad-based increase since the 1970s. Ion Coase, director of the World Bank's Prospects Group, said in the report that low global interest rates provide only a precarious protection against a financial crisis. The history of past waves of debt accumulation shows that these waves tend to have unhappy endings. I don't think you need to be a director or an expert or some analyst to know that in the last history of waves like this ending, it was typically an unhappy event for anyone involved, even the lowest echelons of any society's economy. The first 3 waves of debt were identified as running from 1970 to 1989, 1990 to 2001, and 2002 to 2009. In 2018, global debt climbed to a record high of 230% of gross domestic product, the monetary value of all finished goods and services made within a country at a certain time. In emerging and developing countries, the GDP reached a high of 170%. That number is 54% higher than the GDP point in 2010 during the last financial crisis. One thing I want to add to this, and I got this again from Peter Schiff in a statement he made once several years ago, and it's quite obvious. It's not something that he necessarily came up with, but during this next financial crisis, when this wave of debt does collapse and the global debt cycle unravels, a lot of the emergency measures, a lot of the stops that they had to pull, think of it like a submarine that's having problems and they're blowing tanks or this and that, and they need to surface. A lot of those emergency measures have already been exhausted. They've already thrown the levers, and it's not working. When it comes to looking at things like quantitative easing, okay, they did that. It's been happening. It's still happening. It's not working. It didn't do anything. It delayed perhaps the main event, but it did not fix it. Okay. They dropped interest rates. A lot of places dropped them to negative. A lot of places went to zero. That didn't fix it. They came up with the stimulus programs. What was the one they did here in America? I don't even remember the name of it. It's so stupid. It was basically essentially like the FDR program, Back to Work, American Reinvestment and Recovery Act. That's right, where they built a bunch of projects, and the government thought that they could spend money to, again, create wealth. Well, we all know that's not, governments don't create wealth. So they, took on debt. They just flooded the market with money, started a bunch of projects, shovel-ready, right? Quote-unquote shovel-ready projects. And all of these emergency measures, things like TARP, Toxic Asset Relief Program, the thing they did there, bailing out banks, quantitative easing, lowering interest. And that, they even mailed, do you remember this? They even mailed checks to people. How many of you in the United States remember getting that bailout check from George Bush Jr., little W? He sent checks out to, I got one. I remember I bought gold with it right away. Everyone got a check. Think of what was taking place back then. It's almost like people forget. They have short-term memory loss. They were so desperate to create spending and to try to falsely stimulate the economy, the Treasury mailed everybody in the country a check. I forget what it was even. What was it, like $700? I don't remember. It's insane. It was insane. They created money out of thin air and just mailed it to everybody in the country who had filed taxes at some point to try to stimulate the economy. Okay, these emergency measures did not help. And they're not going to have them at their... I don't believe they'll be able to pull any levers at this point with the next cycle, with the next event. Central banks around the world will continue printing money as long as it's necessary, says legendary investor Jim Rogers, calling it, quote, madness. He talked to RT's Boom Bust about the state of the global economy and what could be over the horizon. Never before in world history have interest rates been so low, Rogers says. The U.S. Central Bank, the Fed, increased its balance sheets by over 500% in less than a decade. Japan's central bank prints money and buys ETFs and bonds. Quote, these are astonishing statements and facts. This is insanity. That's not how sound economic systems are supposed to work, according to the trader. In 2008, we had problems because of too much debt. So, Jim Rogers, I've quoted him, I've read his articles on here several times in the past. However, since then, the debt has skyrocketed everywhere and is going higher and higher. We are going to have a horrible time when this all comes to an end, unquote. Eventually, the market is going to say, we don't want this. We don't want to play this game anymore, and we don't want your garbage paper anymore, unquote, Rogers explained. When that happens, then central banks will print even more and buy even more assets, and that's when we will have a very serious problem. We all are going to pay a horrible price someday, but in the meantime, it's a lot of fun for a lot of people, unquote. My friends, friends of the Junius Maltby channel, that's the conclusion of today's articles. We've covered quite a bit of material in the last 29 minutes. I know a lot of it might seem like repetition or like I'm kicking the carcass of a horse laying on the ground, but it's something we need to do. This is a reminder. This is your, let's call it your pre-2020 gold motivation. I know we're, a week or so into the new year, But this is that motivation video I make for you. This is the one where, I'm cheerleading you on. You might be beaten down a little bit. I know it's been nice. We've scored a couple of touchdowns. We've seen gold score some new highs, some recent highs here. Hitting that 1600 mark was definitely a boost for some people. Seeing it in the 1500 range again is quite a significant psychological accomplishment. I think for all of us, it's like we're thinking, sigh of relief, it's about time. A little bit of vindication, if you will. But don't focus on that. Like I've told you in the past, don't focus on the numbers right now and ever. They're going to beat it down. They're going to manipulate it. Things are going to happen. I mean, it could dip below 15 again. We could have a couple of bad days, a bad week. It could drip back into the 14s for all we know. And again, like I've told you in the past, the only reason I ever check in on it is to report the number here on the screen for you. Regardless of what it is, if I have fiat and I can get metal with it, I'll do the exchange somehow, somewhere, some way. When I have excess paper, I'm going to try to acquire metal with it. That's just the mindset that I have. That's the practice that I've exercised. I think when we look at what's going on, when we look at just the articles we covered today, and you look at just the track record of the Fed, of Wall Street, the global economy, the politicians that are trying to, manipulate this thing and try to steer this thing, it's pretty evident of where it's going to head, where it's going. And, that's why I do what I do. Try to motivate the few of you who are here, the few hundred who might actually make it to the end of a video like this. I know there's very few of you that ever do, but I appreciate those that do. I can see in the analytics here on YouTube, it's always fun to do that, to see what the average retention is. And sometimes I feel like I'm wasting my time here. Like I'm wasting my time on this channel, or that I'm even wasting my time on videos that are 30 minutes long. Because I know that some people either just click on it and click off, or the average viewer might only sit on a video for the last, 6, 7, or 8 minutes. Believe it or not, a video like this, most people have tuned out at the 8-minute mark. They left. They're already gone. They missed the last 20. They're not even here. They don't care. And I understand that people are busy and I'm boring. Done. It's pretty simple, right? You got other things to do. Who wants to sit here and listen to the same old Junius Maltby ramblings and reports? That's fine. Maybe I do it for myself. Maybe there's nobody else out there. Maybe there's nobody. If a tree falls in the woods, no one's there to hear it. Did it actually fall? Sometimes I wonder if, when I'm talking into the little blue snowball mic, if there's nobody on the other end of it, am I actually talking at all? Well, I am. But that's it for tonight. I appreciate those of you who stood by, who like this channel, who give me the thumbs up when they do, and pop good comments down below, engage in conversation. Those of you who subscribe and have notifications on, that's always awesome, because then you're notified when these premiere, when they go live. If I do go live, I'm trying to figure that out again. They changed something in YouTube, so it's hard for me to go live. I'm trying to figure it out so we can do more lives. Those of you who share these videos, I know some of you do. You put them in forums and you post them in different places. That's always great because it expands our viewership. We get other people, new people. I love seeing newcomers. When I see a comment like, "Hey, I'm just a brand new subscriber. I'm going through your videos. Thanks for what you do." That's a huge motivator for me. And then there's of course the foundation members of this channel. There's a few of you out there. You know who you are. Guys like Paladin Stacker, who have supported and donated to the channel in the past, done things to help it out, even as far as friendship, but also sending me links, information, news, having conversations with me on the side, outside of here, personal conversations and emails. Enlightened Patriot, just a phenomenal. He's really one of the gentlemen that I look at as the quintessential Junius Maltby subscriber. I just love the guy to death. Great supporter. He's been there for this channel time and time again. And then there's guys like DW out there. Gosh, there's so many of you, it's hard to even remember. A lot of you have silver in the name, so it's hard. I can't remember all of the different silver stackers that are big parts of this channel. Stacking AG47. Haven't seen him in the comments for a while, but I know he's there. I know he subscribes. Salivate Metal, big guy, good friend, contributor. He's been there for me and helped me design the coin for this channel. That coin really wouldn't exist without guys like Sal. So there you go. Thanks to all of you who support this channel, who are part of it, and help get this message broadcast, because it's my belief that the way we're going to fix this problem and save those like ourselves in what ways we can is by getting as much of the metal, gold and silver, into the hands of the people as possible, and then being able to defend it, fight for it, and acquire, property and capital, and rebuild and start over, and hopefully come up with a sound money future somehow on this planet and in the nations we reside. So spread the message, sound money, of liberty, of freedom in economics here. And again, thanks to all of you. And I'll give you a little bit of news. I guess you deserve it. If you're here, it's 35 minutes into the video. A little secret. Me and Miss Maltby are eloping soon. So in another month, we will be wedded, married, officially, legally. And, we've exchanged our own little vows personally. And in the past, we've, how would you word that? We've committed to each other already. This is more of the paperwork side of things, the legal side of things with each other. And so we're actually doing a nice little ceremony in a mountain setting. We're going to another country, in fact, to be married, which is going to be kind of fun. But we're eloping, and it's just the two of us. No one else will really be there other than the officiant and two witnesses that the officiant provides. But it's going to be a special day for us, a special day for myself, a new hope, a new beginning, and a wonderful life to build. Because remember, I've always reminded us here, true wealth is never in lifeless room temperature metal. No. True wealth is in the joy and the happiness and love that is found in those close to us, our friends, our family, and our loved ones. And I would rather have the presence of someone I love, like Miss Maltby, than all of the metal in the world. I don't need gold and silver. It's nice. It might establish some leisure time in the future or help me have comforts here or there. However, true wealth is not to be stored here on earth. I believe that our good deeds, helping others and being right with God and doing what is good and right and helping others, feeding others, clothing others, serving others, doing unto others as we'd have done unto ourselves, is far greater than material wealth. So don't get me wrong when it comes to my focus on precious metals being the only thing or the only way. It's not like I worship them or anything. No, not at all. They just happen to be real money, and I'm trying to spread that truth in and of itself. So thank you for that, allowing me to share that with all of you. I hope those of you that heard that message find it as good news, because it is. It's very good, and I am happy to be taking her hand in that way. I proposed to her just a little over a month ago, and that was a beautiful and wonderful time. So, all right, until the next video, thanks all for being here.